Hi, this is Reverend Cindy Fuller, Inner Quest Church, and this is your spiritual story number 7. We just keep them coming for you. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about ghosts, but in a slightly different way. Most of you realize that when someone lives on the earth plane and they're very attached to property or situations or people, sometimes when the death comes, they don't want to cross over, so they hang around in those locations or with those people, trying to continue their existence on this earth plane. And we call them trapped souls, lost souls, and a lot of people work with these disembodied spirits to help them cross over to the other side so they can see their life review and then they can be reincarnated again. But sometimes it's not always the case of being lost. Sometimes they are intentionally here. So I wanted to share with you just a few little things that I experienced in my journeys in religious places, in places of worship. Of course, anywhere you go, if you go to a space where there's a cathedral or an old place of worship, sometimes you will literally feel there remains priests, elders, or officiants that have held that worship. In 2011, our group had a trip to Istanbul, to Turkey, and in Istanbul we went to the Blue Mosque. And tourists are only allowed in at certain times because it's still an active place of prayer and worship. And so we put on our garb and we went in, and the place was cordoned off so you couldn't go into the main area. In the main area was a group of men on the other side. You could not see them. With your mortal eyes, it would be a blank space. But there was a group of men doing some sort of prayer and worship. And it was quite fascinating to see. And I got, in my mind's eye, I got one of their attention. Being someone who always tries to help people cross over, I said to him, you guys don't have to stay here and do that. You can go on to God and do something different. And his response to me was very certain. He said, "This is my job. This is what I have always done, and this is what I am doing, to hold the energy of God worship here." And I immediately bowed and honored his commitment. And he and the other group of men that were doing celebration were committed to that for a reason, for their spiritual reason. And it wasn't the first time that I had seen this type of commitment. In 1995, I had the opportunity to go to Egypt, and we toured the Karnak and the Luxor temples. And I was so aware when I went into the space of the Holy of Holies. It's the third level in. I was so aware that there were still beings, priests that were still there. But I did nothing because that was not mine to do. But that evening, Jesus came and he asked for Patrick and I to do a prayer, because in the temple there were hundreds of priests, souls, that had not passed on, that were continuing to serve God in the way that they thought they needed to. The Kaaba, the body of light, the spiritual body, they were serving God as they always had on the earth plane. So with Jesus' help, we did a beautiful column of light, and we thank them so much for their service. But this is ancient Egypt. No one else is worshiping this way anymore, unlike the Blue Mosque. In the Blue Mosque, there is that worship still. But this is ancient, so there were no humans worshiping in the same way. And we thank them so much, these priests, for their service, for all these eons of service. And Jesus showed them how they could lift up the column of light and go to God. And it was the most beautiful release I have ever seen. There were hundreds and hundreds of them. And that was phenomenal. They had all stayed because of a soul purpose. But the soul purpose was no longer needed in the earth at that time. Now, when you're traveling in the UK or Europe and you go to some of the ancient cathedrals and places of worship, oftentimes you'll run into priests. I have been told to kneel. I have approached an altar and I have been told to kneel in a Catholic cathedral. And I always tell the priest that appears at my side, I honor and respect you. That is not my faith. but I honor and respect that you're holding that faith. And I bow and step away from their space. They do not want me in their space. And I would not change that for them. The other encounter that I wanted to share was in Italy, outside of Rome. I believe the cathedral was called St. Paul's outside the wall. And the cathedral had actually been burned and then reconstructed. In Italy, there is a altar almost in the middle of the space, and then underneath, there are steps down. They have a relic that is treasured, that maybe the chains that Paul would have had on him or Peter. They have relics of the ancient disciples encased where you can see them. And so in St. Paul's outside the wall, there was the altar, and I went down and I was welcomed instantly by 7 spirits, 7 people that had died preserving the love of their faith and the love of that relic that was there. And they welcomed me down, and I acknowledged their presence. And then I said to them, you guys don't have to stay here. You can go to God and continue your existence. And at that point, they welcomed me to leave. It was really lovely. They said, no, you need to go now. We're doing what we need to do. We're following our teachings and our belief system, and we need to stay here. So I honored them and left. I shared this with you because when you visit these ancient spaces and you feel someone push your shoulder or you feel compelled to do something, realize that there may actually be priests and hierophants and teachers that are still on the earth plane, still holding the frequency of the old beliefs. Realize we were allowed to release the priests of Luxor because there was no one holding that faith, and Jesus asked us to. Realize that we could commune but not interfere with anyone else in any of the other communities. And we've seen them all over the globe. There are so many beings that are holding the vibration of their worship of God. And if that is their soul journey and their purpose, I salute them. Next time you go in to an ancient space, take a breath. Open your heart to know that even if there is no physical priest present in that space, there were for years people gathered to worship God, to love God. And you will feel the remnant of their love in the walls of the buildings. And likely you will be met as well by a guardian who still resides there. So that's your story for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you did, hit like and leave me a comment. And we're going to continue to walk with you all while we're all in confinement. As we begin to come out of it, we will do these less and less. But if you want us to continue, please say so. All right. Blessings to everyone.